We use our balance sheet, our AAA, in order to better serve our country. We have been doing it in several ways. Barbados have been doing the debt swap. We're talking about Ecuador debt swap, but we started with Barbados, and now we are in a new one with the European Investment Bank, and we are happy to participate in that. So that's another instrument that we have been developing, and I think it's very important for us. And last but not least, yesterday, I'm getting confused. Yesterday or 2 days ago, we were developing a hedging mechanism for climate investment, so that we get investors where we take care about their hedging needs for currency. And we are doing a pilot, and I know you have written about that, but we are doing a pilot with Brazil. A fund with several instruments to be able to hedge, which is very important for investors to get out of this risk. And again, we look around and we say, yes, we can help. We can help with our balance sheet. We can help with our capacity to issue swaps, to do the swaps. So that's important. Mia, we have been presenting here the One Caribbean. One Caribbean, we talk about having a regional program. So we decided that there are 4 priorities: climate resilience and disaster management. Number 2, citizen security, which is becoming very huge. Number 3, food security. And number 4 is private sector and productivity. There are other things, but those are the 4 that we decided the region from the beginning, and they're very precise action plans for next year, for the other, and so we're going to work on that. So that was my presentation at the beginning. So back to you. Well, how are you seeing these challenges? How are you seeing the region?
How am I seeing, sorry?
The challenges, our priorities, and you've been in the public debate, and what do you tell us?
I strongly support the strategic approach you're taking across the region. I have been an advocate for greater coordinated action at the level of the IDB and the CDB and the World Bank with respect to being able to help the region transition and transform. I believe that the water scenario is the most in demand of attention. Almost every country in the region had a distribution system that was put down in excess of a century ago. Almost every country in the region is facing high levels of non-revenue water. Almost every country in the region is also facing drought at different times of the year. The first 6 months of this year, Barbados' rainfall was 50% of its 30-year average.
Wow. And
while the last few months we've had an abundance of water and flooding, the reality is that we are still suffering from lack of water for too long in the year. We have determined in the debt for climate swap that we're doing with the IDB, for example, that we want to be able to take the plant, which ironically the IDB financed 30 or 40 years ago, which was only for separation of solids, to be able to now carry it to full tertiary treatment so that we can use the treated water to replenish the aquifers and also to support agriculture and food security. So that I really do believe that the ability to not only diversify in terms of the range of countries and hence hopefully the risk, the funds being lent, and to keep the pricing down, but also to create a common procurement platform, which is absolutely critical, because the scales at which we will order will not command the attention of any supplier, and certainly will unlikely get the kind of discounts that we could get if we were working in a coordinated fashion. It would also help us immediately post-disaster because if we're using similar pieces of equipment and similar supplies, then we're in a position to support each other. I use water just as an example, but I could equally be talking about any of the other areas that you're talking about strategically. Yeah. And I think that therefore that strategic importance to the approach to the region is absolutely critical at this stage. Within the context of the single market and single economy too, I believe that we set ourselves the target which Guyana has been ably leading under President Ali for food security.
Yes.
And while we set the target of 25 by 2025, that was done pre-COVID. That was done pre the war in Ukraine that led to the astronomical increases in prices of fertilizer, etc. So I really do feel that the logistics of having and making that food security happen. I just finished meeting with Cindy McCain and the World Food Program, is becoming more and more important in a region that is too dependent on Florida for the supply of fresh food. And whether we like it or not, if a hurricane hits Florida on the East Coast and in the same season, 6-8 weeks later, hits the West Coast, you're going to have a total panic in the Caribbean because almost every country depends on fresh food supply within a 7-day period out of Florida. What we've been trying to do, therefore, is to see how we can build greater food resilience, resilience in our food supply chains out of Suriname, out of Guyana, out of Belize, out of Venezuela, out of Brazil, because if we have those 4 countries to the south of us and Belize and others in Central America to the west of us, then I believe we can hedge our bets in a sensible way that will ensure stability. And why is that important? You've talked about citizen security. If at the end of the day we can't feed our people, we've already known what happens in the region when instability starts to spread. So that all of these things are interwoven at this stage, and I want to salute you for your leadership in ensuring that we can take that strategic approach. I also do believe, and I should say this, climate resilience is not going to be real in the region until it reaches the household. And that's the point I was just making in our pavilion. We have to find a way where the IDB and the CDB and possibly the World Bank can work together to ensure that they can deliver at the level of the household now, whether it is working with commercial banks and credit unions on the ground to ensure that the cost of transformation, we talk about transformation. Transformation is accepted and done and pursued by those who can afford it. But there is a whole range of people who would like to be able to do it. But simply, if I'm fighting to be able to feed myself when the day comes, tell me how you going to tell me about a photovoltaic panel or a water tank or any of the things that are necessary, a car that is an electric vehicle. I'm a taxi driver. You understand? Why am I not buying more electric vehicles as a taxi driver when we're buying the buses that way? So I think that there's an opportunity for how the 3 development banks and CAF, 4, how the 4 of you can work together in a seamless way to deliver the green transition to the household and to the community in the Caribbean. And if you can do that, then I really do believe that we can set an example for the rest of the world.
So just to give you, please, Karen.
No, I just wanted to add to what PM Mottley said about agriculture. There are 2 aspects of our agriculture development program that require focused attention. One is access to technology, because the way of growing food has changed significantly. We're bringing more young people in, and those 2 things together means that there is an opportunity to expand food production with young people, introducing technology at a much higher level. So that's one thing. The other thing is, how do we manage risk in large-scale agricultural investment in the reality we face of increasing climate risk? It's hard enough to get insurance for the things we normally insure, business operations, housing and all of that, how do we mitigate? How do we price risk in agriculture? How do we get private sector investment in agriculture? Because nobody is asking governments to get in the business of growing food. It's private sector investment. But the risks involved in agricultural investment, as you know, are normally high. They are even higher now. And so that's a particular bit of work that we require some attention on. How do we provide some kind of risk cover for agricultural investment?
If I may, Ilan, Carla is exactly correct. Because this year, what did we find? Our poultry sector has experienced a higher percentage of mortality among chickens this year because of the heat in August and September.
Wow.
Similarly, once the rains came in the latter part of the year, we now have the experience of convection rain, which we've never had before. So you have this intense rainfall, this intense flooding, and therefore it has affected the agricultural sector. And what it then leads to is a spawning of pests and other things which become resistant to the practices that the farmers are using. So what we're finding is that we're going to have to invest far more in climate-controlled agriculture, which means the greenhouses and the shade farms, which means using technology, which means using hydroponics, which means using, in some instances, vertical farming. The second thing that I want to say, which is consequential upon that, is that we need to get the logistics right and we need to get the transport right. And I'm not only talking about air transport, which Gene has been doing a study on, but I'm also talking about that elusive concept of shipping. The Caribbean will only start to function when we build sea bridges that are functional. And Canada would have given us 2 ships back in the 50s that we talk about with affection, but we've not come to work. And I think I may have mentioned this to you, James, and Avinash certainly is aware of it. Look, we need 5 different aspects in the region. We need something that moves traditional shipping between Guyana, Suriname, Trinidad, Barbados. Then you need a fast ferry system that moves from Trinidad, Grenada, St. Vincent, St. Lucia, Barbados in the south. A similar one is mirrored in the North Islands on the vertical axis, going right up. And then you need one going west from the Northern Caribbean across to Santo Domingo, Haiti, Jamaica, Belize, Cayman Islands there. And then you need one going north-south from Jamaica to Barbados and Trinidad. So that if you master those 5 bridges, the economics of the region changes, and then the most important part of it is opening up northern Brazil, which you know better than me. When I learned that people in Boa Vista have to go back down to Sao Paulo or Brasilia or Rio in order to go north again, it makes no sense. But then when I remember our history, who was it that populated our tourism in Barbados before air travel? It was Brazilians. The whole south coast of Barbados was full of Brazilians in the late 19th century and up until about 1950, because that's where people came, under schooners. So if under your leadership and Gene's leadership and Ajay's leadership, we can get a framework again that places emphasis on the maritime logistics of the region as lead Prime Minister on the single market and single economy, I'm telling you that it will change the economics of the region forever. And it is perhaps the most strategic investment we can make, particularly now that the world is recognizing that the re-globalization, as Ngozi will call it, depends now not just on efficient and the most profitable supply chains, but resilient supply chains that will ensure that we can protect our people when the disasters that are either human or climate related start to happen.
So,
and have greater efficiency and competitiveness at the same time.
I completely agree. You mentioned a lot of points that I would like to comment, but I'm just going to mention 2 or 3 of them. One, that Gene was making the interconnections of the priorities of it. You mentioned how food security is related to climate, and how climate and food security is related to citizen security, and how this is so. we need to think about all of this in an holistic way. We cannot just treat them like this is very separate things. And you just mentioned exactly what we were talking about. The second thing is scale. And here the two scales that we're talking about. One is scale of the market. If you want to make market larger, cheaper food or cheaper, you need the transportation. And you mentioned on this climate financing and the affordable electromobility, how are we going to get it affordable? Not just, you don't not only need to be supplying it, but supplying it in a way that's affordable. I believe that this will come with economies of scale. In a way that if we have a market that is larger, maybe we have more chance of bringing a larger scale, then the batteries are cheaper. Think about what's happening with the solar panels. They were very expensive. Now they're cheaper. That's, my intuition says that this is where we need to go. My last point, coordination. We just signed an agreement now. We have an agreement, but we signed an addendum on these priorities where we're going to go with the Caribbean Development Bank. We are together. With AJ, one of the three topics that we decided this is what we're going to pursue is resilience and climate in the Caribbean. What we need to do is bring them together with CAF, the four of us, and say, well, let's do it. And that's something that we have brought. I hate to pinpoint to Penelope.
I just want to leave one other thing on the table, and that is education transformation. Because unless we transform the way in which we're educating our people in the region, we're going to be playing catch-up all the time. And we have a system that is meant to subjugate rather than to allow citizens to flourish and innovate. And I think that all of the institutions equally, as you focus on climate resilience, as you focus on productivity, as you focus on citizen security, if we don't have an eye for both formal and non-formal education in the region, we're not going to have the people necessary to propel growth, regrettably. Because the other major factor that is often ignored is that the region is significantly underpopulated with the exception of Haiti. You cannot drive growth with the underpopulation that we have. And ECLAC has determined, has projected that Barbados will have 1 in 2 people over the age of 65 by 2050. That is a national disaster. Jamaica and Trinidad are at 37 and 39% over the age of 65. That is also a problem. And in both instances, we're already too close to solve it the natural and enjoyable way, so that we have to solve it through planned and managed migration. If not, we're going to find ourselves incapable of sustaining pensions, incapable of sustaining growth, and becoming a region that will both be uninsurable and uninvestable. And I'm not sure that the clarion, that the clear message has gone out that to avoid this reality in less than 30 years, in fact it's what, 26 years, 27 years, that we need the kind of joined up approach between those institutions that support the region, because very often domestic politics, like in the US, stops sensible decision making, and the only thing that will save it is company. And therefore the conversations have to be regional, the actions have to be regional to avoid the consequences that will inevitably come as they did in the 1930s. Thank you.
Ilan,
So,
just a quick...
I want to, I hate to pinpoint, but I really would like your perspectives. Please sit with us, Penelope.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. Okay, let me just also join with those on the panel and congratulating you on your leadership. I recall when you became the president, you indicated that you will take almost personal responsibility for the process, and I mean, and we are seeing that you're doing exactly that. I think it's important to know that. I would like to just endorse as well the CLIMA, but I have one concern. You spoke about the issue of performance targets, of course, being related to the funding. As someone who is, as Minister of Planning and Development, and I want to talk about Prime Minister Mottley talking about the water sector, for example, one of the issues has to be the gestation period between the signing of the loan, the actual start of the projects, and the length of time that it takes. For a number of reasons, the issue of capacity building, the complexities that exist in relation to the implementations of the loans. So it's how do we address those issues, because it means that it's going to be extremely difficult for a lot of us in the Caribbean to be able to meet the targets of which we speak about, especially when we link the Sustainable Development Goals and the 2030 Agenda. So I think that focus has to be very, very critical in the mix. And I have to say it probably requires a little more hand-holding, a little more assistance in terms of capacity building. Definitely. To ensure that in truth and in fact, what we are trying to achieve, that we do have literally the bodies on the ground who are able to assist us, because the other complexibilities in terms of the vulnerability index for disaster preparedness, and how do we deal with that debt for climate swap, really requires that we ensure that we build capacity. I know, having been a governor of the bank myself, both of the CDB and the IDB, that the resources and the capacity is there, but in the region, I think we need it, or else that the changes of those lines that are 100 years old, and the impatience of our population now, especially with the challenges with climate risk, where you have, in Trinidad, you can just have 15 minutes of rain, and I mean, the flooding is just impossible to even describe. So I think that's really, I just want to focus on that. How could we ensure that the loans, the grants, that it is actually reaching to the population and those who we intend to benefit, so that they can actually see that there is a big difference that is being made. Thank you.
Ilan, may I make a suggestion?
Yes.
I'm sorry, Gene, but I think the moment demands it. All of us are facing the same lack of capacity issue.
Yes.
All of us have the same handful of people trying to do multiple things with multiple institutions.
Yes.
If the IDB and CDB were to fund, along with other donors, the IB, etc., a class team, almost like a SWAT team, of project preparation persons and people who can help in training but also doing at the same time, and that can move across the region. Because if I'm doing something and I'm good at it, I can do 3, 4, 5 countries at the same time because I'm handling it. But what it does is to take the pressure off, because the very principle of the revised Treaty of Chaguaramas is functional cooperation. And rather than all of us trying to replicate island by island by island, all of this project preparation facilities, can we not agree that the 4 institutions, along with then the EIB, come together, work with CARICOM, and help us fund a team that literally is available to be able to, and with the technological platforms that we have, they don't need to be in country all the time, so that they can help advance and monitor and ensure compliance, rather than money remaining dormant and paying commitment fees that go back out.
That's a great idea, and actually that's part of in the One Caribbean, we were thinking about capacity as very important. Not sure that we are thinking the way you were thinking about the project preparation, having scale and getting the efficiency from the fact that you're not doing project preparation facilities in Barbados, then in Jamaica, then in other places in Trinidad and Tobago. Maybe having one together, and I think that's something that we can.
The truth is that the CSME Secretariat is in Barbados, so I'm more than prepared, and it's next to the CDB. So I'm more than prepared to work with you to see how we can scale up, because it's just not there. And the countries don't have the fiscal room to be able to bring in large groups of people on their own.
So we have here our Vice President, Annabelle. She is one of the mentors of the One Caribbean. I think this idea here, I don't know how much we have thought about We thought about project facility preparation. Not sure we thought about it as a joint, but I think this is a very good idea. The other day I was with AJ here, and we were talking about, and at some point I realized that we are having a bilateral and giving work to the people there. So here we're having not a bilateral, a group, and we're having ideas that we should actually implement, and we're just starting this. So, Gene, please.
Yeah, just a quick rejoinder here. You recall we were speaking a little while ago about the triangle, the fit-for-purpose investment, the financing, and the capacity, implementation capacity building. I think what PM Mottley has just said is an exact example of this as to how we need to think about capacity building as an investment in country capacity, not how do you make a project deliver better. And in fact, it is something we have embraced at the bank, and my Vice President Operations here can testify. We are in the process of making that a central pillar of how we advance development. And so with Annabelle, even with Secretary General here, I think your idea of a SOAR team to manage that is a very good point. And I want to maybe add to this, Ilan. Let's make this meeting count. This could be one idea that we could say we want to take forward. But I want to add a second idea. And that second idea is, let's get the 4 development banks, CDB, IDB, CAF, and the World Bank, as the financing institutions to agree. And the AIB, okay, 5, to agree that they will work together to advance one key backbone project. I'll even call it a mission that will actually facilitate the development of the region over the next 10 to 20 years. And that one project, which we've talked about a little, is the connectivity project. The maritime transport that PM Mottley spoke about is one part. We know air is also going to be in there, but I want to suggest we bundle those as 3. Transportation, energy connectedness, and digital connectedness as a transmission backbone that will connect from Jamaica in the west to French Guiana in the southeast, through one, and maybe Belize, yes, coming down.
No, have to have Belize.
Yes, through.
You say maybe?
Through two mechanisms.
I'm not going to discuss with you the geography.
One is it has to be on the ground to make it climate resilient, on the water to give you the connectivity, make it regional in terms of capacity, connected so you have full redundancy. You can leverage the multiple generation and go for a green region. By that time, solar, geothermal, offshore wind, water. And you can provide for the ability to make economic diversification in offshoot of this, because it provides the means for every country to be able to advance at the same time without the need for the energy to propel it, build social cohesion and community development from that, enhance it with education opportunities, the means to fabricate, maintain, all at the same time. So you hit all of the buttons of development: production, social, education, research and development, financial, economic growth, through that one central project that would unify the region, regional development, common market, all at one time. So let's bring the 4 institutions, 5 institutions, if we add the EIB, make it a 10-20 year project, which I'm sure PM Mottley would be happy to take to CARICOM heads and say, we will do this, and we can stick to it for the next 20 years.
Let's make it 10.
10 years.
I can't promise to be alive in 20.
10 years.
Very good. I want to give you the opportunity. We are getting to the end. I know that there is some flexibility of time of getting late to the next commitment, but let's not abuse. So let's finish around time. So I want to give you the opportunity for your final remarks. I'm going to start with you, Carla.
Yeah, thank you very much. I love the idea of the capacity building approach, bringing the major institutions together. In a previous life, I worked with government dealing with projects, and we would often find ourselves in situations where with each bank, with each development agency, we're looking for individual project managers, including engineers, and there are just so many people. It's not a lack of capability, it's just a lack of numbers because we are small countries. But if we had a way of bringing all of that together and ensuring that we can share effectively information, inputs, that it would make such a tremendous difference to the ability of our countries to implement projects on time, within money, and much better. So if there's a way the banks can get together and do that, that would be the single most important thing that would come out of this conversation we're having here, because it has implications for how well we can implement all our resilience projects or agriculture projects or infrastructure projects, because it would enable us to be able to draw on the capacities that we need when we need them. So for me, 100% behind. Let's see if we can get that done. Everything else is good too, but that particular thing.
Love that. Love that. Penelope?
Yeah, thank you again, Mr. President. I want to also thank you for visiting Trinidad and Tobago and visiting the region. I want to end by focusing on something a little different, which is a communication strategy. The IDB does a lot of good work in the region. I don't think it's sufficiently known. I don't think the impact of what the IDB has done over the years is sufficiently known. It's really critical for what we are about to do. Assuming that the decision is taken, what Minister Mottley spoke about and Gene, it is still important to market that project to the extent that those who are the beneficiaries sufficiently understand the importance of what the IDB has done, not just over the years, but what is to be done now, because it becomes extremely difficult to be able sometimes to manage, convince. Too much time is taken doing that. I think we need to reduce that time by the appropriate strategy so that less work is done convincing those who really should probably know better. Thank you.
I have to either. I think the IDB has been doing a lot of stuff and a lot of good stuff and has not communicated it enough. It's also true that there are other things that we are not doing, which we are not communicating what we're not doing, but we are also not communicating what we are doing. So I think your point is important. If we are going to go ahead, do more stuff, do the One Caribbean, think about capacity, work with the 5 banks. We need to be able to communicate it in a way that people are aware and that they are conscious that this is the way forward. Gene?
Thank you. I would say get the 5 banks to agree regionally, beyond political party, beyond national, broad regional, to optimize on scale, to agree on 3 key pillars.
I love it, 3.
3 key pillars. One backbone infrastructure that will take us forward and create opportunities to do everything we need. For me, that's the connectedness project. 2, adequate and affordable finance that is sustainable to allow us to do all of what we are saying for the next 10 years without a problem. And 3, capacity building to allow us to implement in the broad definition we've used, if those are our three anchors, everything else flow from that, and you mobilize the strength of 5 major development institutions to say they are supporting and will drive this for the next 10 years. If we can agree on that, then I think we have the potential recipe to drive the region to another place at the end of the next decade.
Mia?
Thank you. Be our bridge to the Bridgetown Initiative. And I mean that sincerely. Look, if AJIS now agreed that the debt pause clauses are to do existing loans, and I'm a lawyer, Penny's a lawyer, it's just a mutual consent to vary the terms and conditions of the contract. We need long-term capital for social spending in particular. And what we're seeing in the region, regrettably, is that we're still getting loans for 15 years and 10 years to be able to do education and health and social spending. That really is not sufficient. So we need to change the nature of what we anticipate with respect to the lending that we're doing for long term. And we need to be able to change the metrics on debt sustainability. Yeah? Because with debt sustainability, the trajectory is going to be critical. Hey Nigel, what's up? No problem. Yeah.
Time for your comment. Sorry, Mia.
Yeah, we need to be able to have a downward trajectory that is much gentler than what is acceptable in a pre-polycrisis moment. And how much ever money you give us, if the fiscal space is not there, this is a moot conversation. And we need to bring the credit rating agencies and the bank regulators to the table, because I'm not satisfied that the message has gone through the system to facilitate the kind of changes that the system demands now, because there's no sense telling me that I can build resilience in 20 years' time when I've already lost half of my GDP on a sustainable basis, when I've lost my population because they simply are not coming back to live in flood-prone areas and they don't have the capacity to stay. Insurance premiums have increased to the point where governments now have to stand in the breach for every loss and damage event, and where ultimately governments then become incapable of supporting those losses over a protracted period of time. So I really do think that the IDB has to play a role in also being that bridge to the Bridgetown Initiative, and being able to make sure that the advocacy hits the point of being action.